Coming up on this week's show, how to mine bitcoins on your Commodore 64.
The official PlayStation magazine says goodbye.
And we chat to one of the best indie retro gaming studios, Bitbeam Canon.
The Retro Hour podcast is brought to you each week with our amazing mates at Bitmap Books. Now, you need to check out the unofficial SNES Pixel book. If you're a fan of the Super Nintendo, this lavish 272-page volume celebrates the golden age of 16-bit gaming on Nintendo's ultra-popular home console. So check that out and lots more on their website at bitmapbooks.co.uk. Hello and welcome to the Retro Hour podcast, episode number 274, your weekly dose of retro gaming and technology news with me, Dan Wood.
Me, Ravi Abbott.
And me, Joe Fox.
And great to have you joining us for our weekly update on everything that's been happening in the world of retro gaming and technology over the last 7 days. Of course, with a healthy dose of nostalgia sprinkled on for good luck, and bringing you a special guest on the show as well. Now, this week, I'm actually really excited about the guest that you've got this week because I've been keeping an eye on this project that is kind of like a Streets of Rage clone that's coming out for the Amiga. Now, this is by Bitbeam Canon, who I know you, Ravi, and Joe, you actually did this interview together last week.
Yeah, we did this one last week. They unfortunately they were asking for Dan and Ravi, and they got me because Dan was busy working. So I apologise. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry. You got the third one,
the booby prize,
the booby prize." But yeah, this was really cool. We spoke to Mike and Corey from Bitbeam Canon about one of their upcoming games called Metro Siege, which is like a real Final Fight Streets of Rage inspired 16-bit game. But what's really awesome about it is if they've made it and it runs on Amiga, and just at that glance, for me, I'm not an Amiga guy, but looking at it straight away, it just looks like one of the most beautiful Amiga games ever. Ravi got really nerdy with them at one point, and I was like, I don't even know what they're talking about. But talking about all the projects and stuff like that was really awesome that they've got coming up.
It was great having Joe on board, actually, because Joe's got that like Sega knowledge and pixels, yeah. and these guys were really into the consoles as well as like the Amiga, and they wanted to bring this kind of console feel. And they're pretty much pixel experts. They do this series called Retro Pixology, where they go looking through all the old games of the pixels. They're also doing one called Demon Claw as well, and another game called Cyberjack. And these games are just, oh my God, they're so impressive. Like I said to them, if we had a time machine and went back into the past, you guys would be hit game makers. I still think they are in today's world. But it's just amazing seeing this game. Like the Amiga, man, it didn't have the best fighting titles, did it? It always got the kind of weaker ports and the rushed titles. There were some good, like little standout cult things, but standing up against something like the Mega Drive and the huge titles on there, it did suffer with one button joystick and stuff like that.
What I think was really interesting as well is like what you just touched on there was we were talking about how the Amiga got some ports of like Street Fighter 2 and stuff like that, but you found they were made by one guy who got 6 weeks to make it, and he'd have to build it from like the ground up.
Yeah, had none of the original assets.
Yeah, with like Final Fight and stuff like that. But they were saying this is what happens when you get like two guys who have just, doing this for fun on the side, as well as their other game development job and stuff like that. This is what happens when you spend a couple of years on it, and actually how good you can get these games to look, kind of thing.
Yeah, with good really artists cool. And all the kind of tips and tricks. So it's a really, really interesting interview this week.
Actually, that is one of my favourite things about doing this show, when we get to give a bit of coverage and also talk to as well these indie game studios who are doing the most mind-blowing things on retro systems. And we cover them all the time, like you said, Ravi, the fact that these guys are doing things that we previously didn't think these systems were capable of back in their heyday. I mean, they really have figured out the hardware and how to just make it sing, haven't they?
Yeah, totally. You're going to love this one, Dad.
Well, it's good just to kick back and listen to it as well. So looking forward to this one. Michael and Corey from Bitbeam Canon coming up on the Retro Hour podcast in around 20 minutes from now. Now, actually, speaking of community, I mean, at the moment here in the UK, obviously, first week of May, I know things are different around the world right now, but here, what they're calling, non-essential retail has been open for a couple of weeks now. To us, I think retro gaming shopping is pretty essential anyway. But I mean, you guys have actually been out and about shopping in retro gaming stores again, which just sounds like heaven.
Oh God, yeah. Today, I felt like a human again. being able to like look through the stuff. I went to a Parallel Universe in Nottingham, and they'd cleaned up during the whole setup, so they had like loads of rows of games and stuff. It was really nice. But they had loads of bargains as well. And this is an independent retro video game store, and I got a mini disc player, 2 mini disc players, and a huge collection of mini discs. So I'm going through them at the moment, listening to some banging tunes from the 2000s.
From Danny Minogue and Emma Bunton.
Yeah. And there's also loads of games there as well. And it's just great to be actually, not trawling eBay, but going out and looking and kind of getting some really good bargains and supporting these places.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I mentioned it on the After Hours. I forgot the name of our own show then. I mentioned on the After Hours show this week, I went to Leicester with my wife last week. The first time we've literally been out in over a year into any sort of town centre. And I went to Super Game Shack, which is like a relatively new retro game shop in Leicester. I think it only opened about 6 months ago during the lockdown. And that was a really, really, really beautiful shop. I was only in there for about 10 minutes. I could have easily spent about an hour in there kind of picking through all these games, but I picked up a couple of Sega Saturn games that she did me an awesome deal on. And then this weekend just gone, I had a day free, which very rarely happens now. I have a child. And my wife literally says, go do whatever you want. So I drove to Derby and I went to, I think it's called Mobile Game Exchange, which is like a retro shop, but sells like, kind of like one of these game shops. It sells like modern games, retro games, like laptops, a bit like CEX. And they have a really nice big retro section. And I bought more Sega Saturn games, which, they didn't have to do me a deal on at all. I didn't even ask because they were so cheap for what they were. I don't know if people are just trying to get them off the shelves and stuff like that, because of times have been hard and they've been closed and stuff. But yeah, it was really, really, really nice to get out and like Ravi says, and like you say, Dan, support the community rather than trolling through eBay and stuff like that.
And it makes you feel normal, doesn't it? It's like a normal kind of activity.
Yeah, definitely. Something I've missed this last kind of like year and a half.
But we did get a little message, actually, tying into this from Richard on our Facebook page. And he said it would be nice if we can do regular shout-outs to retro gaming shops in the UK. Because, there are not that many around anymore. And a lot of them were struggling even before the pandemic. So it'd be good to give them a nice little shout-out. So what we've been doing, actually, you put a post on our Facebook page and on Twitter as well. And a few people have already got in touch saying that, there's this great little retro gaming shop. It's only run by a couple of people. They're not very good at, they haven't got a website. They're not very good at social media, so they're a bit unheard of. But maybe you've got a store that you go to that you think deserves a little bit of love. Now, this is obviously the time when these businesses need all the help that they can get. So if you've got a local retro gaming shop anywhere in the world. Yeah, can be, obviously, we're a global podcast. Let us know about them and why they're so good. You can just leave a comment on our Facebook or Twitter. We are Retro Hour UK on Twitter, or just search for the Retro Hour podcast. Or if it's a bit longer, you can email us, show@theretrohour.com. And I think it would be nice if we can give a bit of love to these retailers that have obviously had a really hard time of it over the last year and really need our help.
Because this is a wicked suggestion. Like, each week we can kind of feature a local retro game store and give them a shout. And, hopefully they'll get some more custom, because we want these independent stores to kind of last. And, we want them to keep going.
Yeah, there's nothing better than going and actually seeing the systems and the games in person, is compared to being on the screen. So, yeah, do get in touch if you've got a local retro gaming store that you think deserves a little bit of love, and we will hopefully give them a mention very soon. Now, before we get into the news this week, we just want to give a big thank you to this week's sponsor, our amazing friends at Curve. Now, I know, Ravi, you've been out shopping. I imagine Curve's got a lot of hammering today while you've been in town.
Yeah, it has. I've been like, I'm going to get a coffee. I'm going to get this, and it's absolutely fantastic. Curve is. It stores all your loyalty cards as well. So when I was going in these places, I was getting the loyalty, but I was also getting 1% cash back off selected retailers. So you can select like your best retailers, the ones that you regularly go to, and you can get cash back on your purchases. So even when you're buying, you're getting a little bit back. And it's got no monthly fees as well, Curve Blue. So it's basically like a kind of MasterCard or a Visa and an app. And yeah, I just absolutely love it. It comes with loads of extra features as well. It's my number one card at the moment. It's all I use.
Well, the idea behind Curve is, they want to simplify your life, because we've all had this, how many times have you gone into, Boots, for example, have you got your Advantage card? You're like, oh, yeah, I've got one, but, it's at home, it's in a drawer, or it's in my other wallet, or, you're going out in the summer, you haven't got a coat with you don't want to put a big wallet in your pocket. Curve is all about simplifying your life and making your daily finances more efficient. So you can have your MasterCard, your Visas, all on one card and app, and your loyalty cards, Boots, Tesco, lots more as well. So that means your finances are all in one place and you can track your entire wallet spending in one app. And they've even got this great little feature called Go Back in Time, haven't they?
Yeah, Go Back in Time's great. We were saying, Joe likes to make all of these purchases and hide it from the wife. The Go Back in Time feature is absolutely awesome for that, because you can go back 90 days and you can move payments from one card to another. So kind of switch payments.
Yeah, which is absolutely awesome. And also they give you purchase protection up to 100,000 euros as well. We want you to give Curve a try. And also we want to give you some free money. It doesn't get better than that. So new users who use our code will get £5 of Curve cash after your first purchase. And the Curve Blue card has got no monthly fees, but still will boost all your cards as well. So you can sign up right now and, of course, help out the Retro Hour podcast by supporting our sponsors. Head to curve.com/retro. That's curve.com/retro. And a big thank you to Curve for supporting our podcast. Now, this was some news that a few people have been in touch with over the last week. Big shout out to Keith. Keith's amazing in our Discord, isn't he? He gives us so many news stories for the show.
Oh, yeah. And I've actually made a new news stories channel. So you guys can actually share some, because it usually goes in general chat. So we're getting a bit more organised on the Discord front.
Yes, I mean, if you do spot any retro gaming stories, you want to let us know about, Discord's a really good place to do it. And thank you to Keith for pointing this one out. And this is that the official PlayStation magazine here in the UK that Future Publishing have published for 25 years now is now no more. I mean, they're not actually discontinuing it, but it's becoming a multi-platform magazine called Play Magazine because, Sony are no longer advocating this as an official magazine. So that is kind of sad, actually, because it does mean, I didn't realise this, that, looking at this article here on Eurogamer, there are now no official magazines left in the UK.
I was going to say, because official Nintendo magazine ended like 5-6 years ago in 2015.
Yeah.
And then official Xbox magazine ended last year, which I think we mentioned.
March last year.
So that's it. Official PlayStation gone now as well. But it is good that they're carrying on, and it's the same editors, it's the same team. They're not having like a restructure or anything like that, are they? It's all the same guys, but like you say, they're going multi-platform. So there's a little bit of a good news story there.
And this is the one that was running from like 95 that had the
demo
discs back on it. The legendary demo discs. That we
the legendary demo discs. Yeah, these guys, it's the same magazine, which, I think we've mentioned before because we've been sponsored by them a couple of times, haven't we, over the years? Yeah. So we've, spoke about it before with the demo discs and stuff. But yeah, it feels like a real end of an era kind of thing. It's nice. There's good news there that, nobody's not out of a job or anything like that. They're going to carry on and stuff. I think that side of it's nice. But like you say, that's it. No official magazines, no official, sponsored game magazines in the UK anymore.
It is crazy, though, because when you think of those early days of the PlayStation magazine, and, 1995, it came out. And I remember my brother getting a PS1 that Christmas 95, and being like, that was such a hot new system. But obviously, the games were quite pricey, especially when you were a kid. So having these magazines, your dad would go into WH Smith or something, you're begging for one of these. And then those demo discs, they keep you going for months. I mean, I'm looking here at issue 1. There was 8 demos on the CD that came on the front of the magazine.
Yeah, man. My cousin, I didn't used to buy the magazine, naughty. My cousin, who's probably about 20 years older than me, so he was like in his mid-20s at this point. I remember once, and it was like Christmas came early because, when you're that age, you get like a game for Christmas and a game for your birthday. And I remember he gave me a stack of about 50 official PlayStation magazine demos. Wow. Like in like 98 or something like that, like literally number 1 to number 50. And
are you still playing them today, are you?
Yeah, I don't know where they are. I don't have them, unfortunately, which is annoying because I do have the majority of my collection from when I was a child. But yeah, it was like Christmas come early. Like you say, like the minimum like 7 or 8 games on them. Usually like 10, 15 games. I used to be always really disappointed when it was just a trailer for the game, though. and you couldn't actually play the first level or anything like that. But yeah, man, proper end of an era.
And back then they were actually selling so many. Apparently back in the peak of this magazine, they were selling 500,000 copies a month. That was beating the likes of FHM.
Oh, wow.
Back in the day.
It's mad because, there's so many PlayStation systems, like more than 5. You've got the Vita and the PSP and stuff like that. There's lots to talk about, but it just seems to be this license fee that they can't kind of keep up. So they turn into multi-format, but I guess it would also be affected by, news agents being closed, stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Looking at this article, it's like apparently Future Publishing have said that it looks like they're just not going to pay Sony to use the official tagline anymore. So it's not so much Sony pulling the plug, it's the other way around. The fact that they've said, video game retail, that's been closed for a year. That's impacted the sales figures of their magazines. And I guess just, the cost of having that official logo stamped on the front just probably wasn't, viable anymore, I guess.
Maybe being like multi-format, they might start getting some of the Xbox users and the Switch. They could probably start covering that as well. It probably frees them up a bit more to cover more items.
It could, like you say, it could like rise on the ashes for them. They could get more sales off the back of it because of there's gaps in the market with Nintendo and Xbox and stuff like that. So it could work out for them like really nicely, to be honest. So, it would be great if they brought back some sort of demo. Can you imagine? Some crazy demo that's got a bit of everything.
A demo Blu-ray.
Yeah, that would be incredible.
And us guys having like, retro running through our veins, we love a good paper magazine. I mean, Ravi actually edits a paper magazine, so we're big advocates of a paper mag. So rest in peace, official PlayStation magazine, and long live Play magazine. Looking forward to seeing what they do with that. Now, it's just been crazy recently how many retro systems are currently being used as Bitcoin miners. Now, we did cover that story about the Game Boy being used to mine Bitcoins last month, and Destroy007 on our Discord send this link over here on PC Gamer. This is a video by someone who's on our show recently, 8-Bit Show and Tell, and this is a video showing Bitcoin mining on the Commodore 64.
Yeah, this one actually seems like it's going to be quicker than bit mining on the Game Boy. But
apparently it is a bit quicker. Yeah, not too much, but it is a bit.
It'll still take like 1 trillion years or something.
It would cost $1.1 quadrillion in energy to get 1 Bitcoin.
Maybe that's what they'll be worth in the future.
Oh, and it would take 50 trillion years. You are right. Yeah, 50 trillion years to do it as well. Wow.
It's interesting to see these kind of like, it's obviously it's not useful in any way, but it's kind of fun.
What do you mean? They've still got it set up, Ravi.
His electricity bill is going up every year, but yeah, it's not useful in any way, but it's kind of a mad little proof of concept, isn't it? And it's just like, look what we can do with our low-end CPUs compared to the monsters that you get today.
Do you remember there's an episode of Red Dwarf when I think that the electricity company are chasing, I think it's Lister, 3 million years into deep space with an electric bill because apparently only him and the electric company actually have any money left in the world because he left his bathroom light on for 3 million years.
I've not seen that one.
It kind of reminds me of this, yeah.
It'll be some dude in space like, I've mined my final coin on my C64.
Of this ancient technology, of this ancient coin.
Yeah, no, I mean, we don't want to get too much into the ins and outs of Bitcoin mining and hashes and all that kind of thing, but I'll link up the video and the article here on actually PC Gamer that Robin's done. It's really interesting. Again, I mean, you can actually see it working and how it's kind of figuring out the hashes and stuff like that. Like you said, Ravi, I mean, it's just for a bit of fun, really. You're not going to get rich off doing this. I do love some of the comments in here too as well on this article. People saying, right, that's it. Going to be a global shortage of Commodore 64s now. People are using it for mining.
I can imagine, like, even if they got every single, C64 left in the world, which probably isn't that many. I would imagine it's in the thousands, I imagine. And got them all.
There's still 32 million of them back in the day.
32 million of them. Okay, so let's say half of them survived. We've still got 16 million of them. I'm still sure it'd probably still take a good couple of million, if not trillion of years still to mine a coin on all of them running at once.
Just imagine an island with them all side by side, whirring away.
Ravi just there controlling them all, mine tending to them like a garden.
Castaway style.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I do love seeing stuff like this. And the 64, I mean, we mentioned obviously recently Christy and Perifractic, contacting the space station with them as well. It's awesome, the kind of things people are doing with that platform at the moment, I think. Maybe you have got a few spare Bitcoins kicking around and you've got a spare few grand to spend on this. The Queen Elizabeth II's 24-karat gold Nintendo Wii is up for sale if you've got a spare £300,000 kicking around.
This, I feel like that's clickbait because I don't know the full story behind it. I think Ravi knows a little bit more about it, but she never actually accepted the Wii, did she? So it was never actually hers, but it was built for her, wasn't it?
Yeah, so THQ built a solid gold 24-karat Wii console. Now, this console, it's been around for quite a few years, so I think this is a drumming up of marketing for it to kind of get a higher value out of it. And there's a few statements here saying some experts have said it could fetch up to $1 million. But it's being sold for 300,000 by it now on eBay. And we looked into it on my stream actually on the Retro Hours Twitch. And being gold, obviously it's got a lot of scratches on it because gold is quite soft. But it seems that the actual console unit is solid gold, but the controller, it's got a bit of paint scraping off it, and it just looks like it's a sprayed normal controller, a normal Wii one, white one.
I mean, it isn't actually solid gold, it's gold laden. So
plated.
Plated, yeah, so it is just, gold on there. So maybe, the gold is coming off on the Wii controller.
And then, I think the most offensive thing about it is they sent an NTSC one. No wonder she didn't accept it. Like, she wouldn't have been able to use any games if you were sending a Wii to the Queen. You need to send a PAL.
She was offended.
Yeah.
So
this won't work on my television.
I will have to get all my games on import.
So what's interesting about it is, obviously it didn't sell. They were never selling it her, so she declined to accept it. Whenever it might have been. I mean, it came with the game Big Family Games. I'm assuming in the heyday of the Wii, like 2008. It ended up in a collector's hands called Donny Fillerup. Now, I want to know is how he got a hold of that. Like, I'm sure I read something about it the other day about how, he was friends with somebody who worked at THQ or something like that.
Oh, yeah, we were doing some sneaky little looks on his eBay account, and it seems like he's into buying these prototypes and stuff. So recently he bought a Nintendo GameCube Fighters prototype and stuff. So I think he's basically purchased this and he's gone round talking to lots of people, and then lots of people have picked it up and gone, the Queen's Wii.
Yeah,
it's a good headline, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Like you say, it's drumming up, the hype and stuff like that. But what really makes me laugh is like, the statement of, $1 million is of course the ultimate dream, but I must be a little bit reasonable, which is why he's put it for 300,000. But a good friend of mine who works at Nintendo told me I should sell it for a price so high that it would never sell. He advised I should start with $500,000. Well, that just doesn't make sense. You should sell for a price that would so high it would never find a buyer. Like, it would never sell.
Well, good luck to him if he does actually.
Like, that's me turning around going, I want to sell my iPhone X because I'm getting a new one. I want to list it for a price it would never sell for. $1 million.
Although if your missus says to you, Joe, you need to sell all your games off, you could just do that trick. I guess that might work.
Yeah, and just be like, nobody's buying it. I don't know why. And then she puts it in the paper for £50.
I think if he finds a buyer, the buyer needs to be a fan of NTSC Wii's, the royal family.
A royalist.
And gold.
And big family games as well.
It isn't. I mean, I wonder how it got out there, but I'm reading about THQ, who actually went bankrupt in 2013.
This is why.
Well, they had liabilities of $250 million, so maybe that was just kind of clearing out the offices and stuff, and that was in there to try and raise a bit of money. I imagine that's probably how it got out there. But Yeah, like you said, very cool headline, I think. It wasn't accepted by Buckingham Palace obviously means the Queen is not that into her video games, I'd imagine, unfortunately.
That's a shame.
Well, now we're talking about things opening up again. Let's give a big shout to something. If you're near Milton Keynes, this looks incredible. A place called the Pixel Bunker that's going to be opening this summer.
Yeah, so, kind of there's been a lot of arcades and they've actually been able to work and go with COVID because, they've been able to put safety precautions in there, have lots of cleaning regimes and stuff. And this looks pretty cool. They've said they've got a collection of over 200 dedicated arcade cabinets that are coming and 150 boards. So that means that they've got over 350 games to choose from. So they're going to rotate and have a new machine every single week, which is pretty cool. And it's based in Milton Keynes, so it's quite near Bletchley Park as well, which was a centre of technology and where they had the Enigma machine. So I think it's cool to see these places open up, and it has close to 100 cabinets free to play for people inside the venue.
That's what I love about places like this. I mean, Arcade Club's similar as well, isn't it? You pay on the door, you go in, like this one here, you get 3 hours to game as much as you want. Every game inside set on free to play. You don't need to, go and get change from coin machines and spend a fortune in there as well. To me, that not only makes the gaming experience more fun, but also it makes you try out games that you probably wouldn't play if you had to pay for them.
Yeah, totally. And I just think it's good to see these things kind of opening up and, get down there and check it out if you can.
Yeah, all the classics, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong, Outrun, Track and Field, or Outrun on the original arcade cabinet. How incredible is that to play? Street Fighter 2, Bubble Bobble, loads of games from the 80s, 90s and 2000s. I just think, in recent years, it does seem like the arcade experience is making a big comeback. And, when you go to them, it just makes you realise how much you miss them.
Yeah, totally.
I miss I can't even think of it, the atmosphere of just all the 8-bit and 16-bit noises amongst all the just the noise of people talking and chatting and having fun and stuff like that real kind of something we've not experienced, that ambient kind of noise of being in a town centre or something. We've just being in an arcade and hearing that is I really miss that at the moment.
And me screaming when you beat me on Street Fighter
or when you beat me and you go, yes!
I was trying to be nice.
They're much nicer than back in the days where you were, hair gel, cigarettes, and you were scared of getting beaten up.
But actually that smell is very nostalgic when you walk in. That obviously there isn't the stale cigarette smell anymore, but you do get that. It's a kind of like an ozone kind of smell, or the CRTs, and the warm cabinets and the warm electronics when you walk in. There is a definite distinctive smell to an arcade, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. Usually burning dust, on the motherboards and stuff.
And usually beer as well these days, now that we're all a bit older.
Yeah, definitely.
And this place is going to have a lot of the original ones as well. It's not going to be this LCD kind of pick your game thing, and it's opening on 4th of June.
Yeah, so the Pixel Bunker in Milton Keynes, only about half an hour drive from London as well. So if you're in the area, definitely worth a look in. Now, before we get into our chat this week with the crew from Bitbeam Canon, let's give a big thank you to another supporter of the Retro Hour podcast, and this is our amazing friends at ExpressVPN. Now, things have changed quite a lot on the internet over the last few decades. We used to have privacy online, and actually, I've been watching a really good documentary all about the BBS scene, the bulletin board scene, called Back to the BBS, by Al's Geek Lab, 4-part series, really good. And actually on there, he's talking to a lot of people that are under 20 that are into bulletin boards because they're just sick of their data being mined and sold and everything getting aggregated and collected and, put into your public record when you're online. That's the thing at the moment. When you go on the internet, everything you do, everything that you browse, search for, watched and tweeted is being recorded all the time. But obviously, we're nostalgic guys. We remember an era when everyone was online back in the day and this didn't happen. Everyone wasn't a public figure, which is why if you want to get your privacy back, to keep your data private when you go online, check out ExpressVPN. And you've always been, you're probably the biggest advocate of privacy that I know, Ravi.
Yeah, I love it. And I love ExpressVPN as well. It's really easy to use. You can have it on your router, on your laptop, phone, and on your smart TV as well. So it's really easy just to select. I actually have it on my PC, and I have it to automatically start up. So as soon as I start my PC, I don't even know that I'm connected. But when I am connected to it, my connection gets rerouted through an encrypted server, and basically means my IP address is masked because there's lots of people then sharing that same IP address, and your activity can't be tracked. Stuff like advertisers, they can't build these advertising profiles about you, and it's really, really good for kind of protecting yourself from data brokers and businesses that want to go out there and sell your data as well.
Yeah, so if you want to keep your data private, have a look at ExpressVPN. And like you said, then it's so easy to set up as well. And it can work on all your devices, your phone, your laptop, your smart TV even as well. All you have to do is tap one button to get protected. So if you believe your data is your business, secure yourself with the #1 rated VPN on the market and use our exclusive offer to get 3 months for free. So that is expressvpn.com/retro, expressvpn.com/retro. Get your 3 months free and, of course, support the Retro Hour podcast. And can we just take a moment to give a big thank you to our amazing patrons, the lifeblood of this show, the people who allow us to bring you the Retro Hour podcast every single Friday, bring you these amazing guests that we have every single week. Can't believe that we've had 274 episodes. I think around 270 of them with a special guest as well. We've had some of the biggest names in the industry, and it's thanks to you guys, our patrons, that we can keep doing this show. And also last week, for backing the show on Patreon, you get some rewards as well, including our exclusive patrons-only podcast, the Retro Hour After Hours. Well, last week, we took a little trip back to the year 2000 as well. That was fun, wasn't it? Going back to the start of the last decade.
Yeah, man, we were talking about PlayStation 2 and one of Ravi's favourite subjects, everything being silver in the year 2000. Everything
silver
had
and chrome.
Chrome finish to everything. And what I also enjoyed was we got our opinions on the new Mortal Kombat film as well. We discussed that as well, which was cool.
It is good, though, because the After Hours podcast can often be longer than the main podcast.
Yeah, sometimes it ends up being about 2 hours long, and and it just like we just get into it. Like, with the main podcast, we always try to make sure it's meant to be the Retro Hour, so it's usually about an hour and a half long. So we're very conscious of it. But yeah, on the After Hours, we just end up just hanging out, don't we? And speaking of hangouts, we also have our Google Hangouts about once a month as well, don't we?
Yeah, so we're going to be doing another one of those this weekend on Sunday evening at 7 p.m. If you guys are around then, Sunday evening.
Yeah, man.
So we love doing this as well. Every month, start of the month, we all get together on Google Meets and we just have a chat about all things retro video game. And generally the conversation, we talk about movies and all sorts of stuff as well. Really just a good excuse to get together with a few mates. It kind of feels a bit like a virtual kind of users group, doesn't it, when we all get together on our Patrons Hangout. So it will be amazing to see you there this weekend on Sunday evening. Check out the 11 episodes that we've done so far of the After Hours podcast. You get the regular podcast often early, ad-free as well. But really, you're just showing your support for the Retro Hour and making sure that we can continue to bring it to you each and every week. And of course, for supporting the show on Patreon, you will get a mention in the most exclusive high score table in the world of retro gaming, the Retro Hour Hall of Fame. And a big thank you this week to our latest patrons, Ollie Holmes,
Max Ward,
Paul Bullard,
Andrew S,
and Gary Audley,
who all made donations into our Patreon. We massively appreciate that. Thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts. And if you'd like to do the same, you'll find the link on our website at theretrohour.com. Right, next, we are going to be chatting to Michael and Corey of one of the best independent game studios making retro arcade and console kind of games inspired by the golden age of 8 and 16-bit video games. The crew from Bitbeam Canon, and next on the Retro Hour podcast.
Amiga! You're listening to the Retro Hour, and I'm here with Michael and Corey from Bitbeam Canon. How are you doing, guys?
Doing great. How are you doing?
Well, we always start with a question, and I'm going to ask it to Michael first. What was your first video game experience?
Wow, that goes way back. I'm pretty old, so we're talking arcades, and I think my strongest first memory, direct memory, was Pac-Man, but there was definitely some Space Invaders, and I maybe even saw Pong. The first home console, at some point, my parents got an Atari 2600. But yeah, that's how far back it goes. So I've basically grown up in a family that's had, a video game system in the house, starting back in the early, Atari days, and then 8-bit Nintendo, Sega Master System, Mega Drive, Super Nintendo, all the way up through the years.
And where did you grow up, Michael?
I grew up in Providence, Rhode Island, on
Okay.
the east side of the U.S.
Did you said there where you grew up with the Master System and stuff? Did you see a lot of that kind of like, in Rhode Island and stuff? Because I know the Master System didn't sell too well in America, did it?
Similarly to the Amiga, it was kind of the underdog, despite being visually more powerful than its competitor.
Oh, interesting. And same question for you, Corey. What was your earliest gaming experience or gaming memory?
I came into the world in the early 80s or so I was more of a Nintendo kid growing up. However, when I was very young, I had a hand-me-down Atari 2600 console. And with like tons of the games, so because they were, at that point, they were less valuable and just kind of left over and nobody wanted them anymore. Yeah. So I'd play things like, Yar's Revenge and, Combat and all of that stuff. Got into the NES. I think it was a little bit after it came out, once our household had one. And also my first computer was another hand-me-down device. It was like an old 286 computer, IBM, like a DOS computer. And I played a lot of the early, old DOS games and stuff as well then. So that was my first experiences with games.
That's cool. And where did you grow up as well?
I grew up in the East Tennessee area in the United States, so kind of near Knoxville. So a lot of the stuff that, Amiga related and Master System, as Mike talks about, you just didn't see it here, to be honest with you. So, yeah.
Well, which games were a huge influence on you when you were younger and like you really got engaged with their graphic style and the kind of presentation behind them?
For me, that would be probably the NES games are where it really took hold, and I started being really impressed by games and their visuals. Things like the Mega Man series, the early Mario games, possibly, Castlevania, that kind of stuff. I loved a lot of those games growing up, and that, led into the 16-bit territory as well, where I branched out. As I got older, I liked many different genres of games as well. So
for me, it was actually, I really started developing a love for pixel art with the Commodore 64. We got that in our household for a few years before we were able to upgrade to Amigas. And there was late in the Commodore 64's life, they introduced a kind of a graphic operating system. I think it was called GEOS or Geo or something like that. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Yeah, it was green, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it actually came with a very nice pixel art package. So I started developing skills and my love for pixel art with that. And then it was a revelation when we got an Amiga and I could start using Deluxe Paint and eventually a program called Brilliance, which was really where I gained most of my pixel art experience before eventually going to PC and getting a job in the industry.
So how did you boys meet?
We both worked in the mobile games industry at different companies. And when we were both in the same company in California, it was Glue Mobile. We were in the same office together. And this was a long time ago. I'd say more than a decade ago. And that's how we met each other. And, at that time, there was a whole team of art team and everything there. And there's only so much you can get to know people in a certain amount of time. And we were all working on various projects, but, everyone on the art team there, they had a good art culture and everybody got to know each other very well. And, we kept contact over the years and eventually started working together on this more recent stuff and Bitbeam Canon, in recent years.
What titles were you guys working on mobile, and like what time period was this as well? What were the mobiles like? Was it a Snake or a bit further developed?
Yeah, I started in the industry when phones were still fairly primitive, but we're talking very 16-bit like, but only 2D at first. But then only about a year into my career, the technology was developing so incredibly fast that after about a year of doing 2D 16-bit style games, suddenly I had to learn how to do 3D texture modeling and texture mapping for a 3D game that was remarkably similar to a PlayStation 1 on, I think that was like one of the first Sony Ericsson phones or something like that. One of the first Sony phones that was quite powerful. And so I'm really bad with dates, but that's about the time. It was definitely several years before the first iPhone, if that puts it into a time zone for people.
So probably like 2005, maybe 2006.
Yeah, around there. But like I said, I'm terrible. But we were in the industry for many years, and it really exploded. Even 2D games became remarkably high res, no color limitations like you would run into on classic 16-bit systems in Amiga. I think we both worked on, or I know I also worked on games for things like the Game Boy Advance and DS and stuff like that. Probably one of the most well-recognized games that I did quite a few sprite animations for was Thor: God of Thunder by Way Forward I think it's for the DS. It's really nice 2D classic pixel art, very 16-bit style action game. And also one of the Mighty Switch Force games I did quite a bit of sprite work on.
Was there a demand for like pixel artists back then in the phone area? Because I know a lot of people kind of moved on from older platforms and doing pixels into the mobile phone, like Java world.
Yeah, I had a similar time frame getting into the industry actually as Mike. I thought he might have been there some years before me, but yeah, a few years before smartphones. So yeah, during those days of the flip phones and stuff, there was a demand for pixel art, and we were some of the pixel artists that went to those areas for that reason, because we had practiced a lot in that area. And yeah, some of the early games I worked on were, platformers and things for these old phones before the iPhone days. And that's when things totally changed, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd really call it the first renaissance for pixel artists, because it really had died out and it was very difficult to look for an actual career you could pay your bills with doing pixel art for decades. And then the cell phones hit, and suddenly there was this demand again for people with the ability to work within extremely limited screen resolutions and memory, just like it had been in the 8 and 16-bit days. But then that technology grew so fast. Luckily, for the last 5 to 10 years, there's sort of a second renaissance happened with pixel art, where retro just became cool and fashionable. So now it's once again possible to do well for yourself, or at least get work doing pixel art. So, but there were definitely the first big dip was after the whole 16-bit thing. Once everything went 3D, it was very hard to maintain employment as a pixel artist. And then the cell phones really changed that, and then it dipped again. And now with retro being really fashionable, it's a good time for pixel artists.
So I liked what you said there, how retro's become fashionable and stuff again. So that kind of leads into Bitbeam Canon. How did Bitbeam Canon kind of come to life? How did you guys decide to do that? What's the kind of the journey and the story there?
Yeah, some years back, after we had parted ways from the mobile industry, Mike contacted me, and we were working together on some various, art pack sort of stuff, just collaborating on different things. And eventually, after, some years of keeping in good touch and working together, we decided, it would be a good idea to make our own games. And Mike had the idea for the name of Bitbeam Canon, and it kind of went from there, and we sort of fleshed out the idea some. This was some years back. And then, eventually we had to brainstorm games and try various ideas for games. It took a while for it to get where it is now. So, yeah.
So was it initially just you two? Are you two the kind of like the founding members? Is there more people working with you, or is it still just the two of you?
It is just us, but we are collaborating with Alex Brown, who's an amazing programmer in the Amiga community, and we're working with someone he had partnered with in the past to make the Amiga game Worthy. John Securis, I think is how you say his last name. who was the pixel artist for Worthy, and he's done pixel artwork to help with Metro Siege. But it also turns out he's an incredible musician, and he's doing the soundtrack for Metro Siege as well. So John Takiris, he calls basically his game studio Pixel Glass, and then Alex Brown, who's the programmer again, he calls his programming house, you could call it, Enable Software. And so they're not part of Bitbeam Canon, but we're collaborating with them, and probably not only for Metro Siege. We work very well with them. They have, they just do amazing stuff, which we'll probably get into later when we talk more about Metro Siege. But just, especially in an industry like this, when you find really talented, passionate people that you really communicate well with and really have similar visions, you you form those relationships and you treasure them.
Well, did you guys have any formal training? Because I was checking out your portfolio, and I love the fine art child's crayon Mona Lisa that you did as well.
Thanks.
Yeah, for me, I got into sort of graphic design studies getting into college, because back then, there wasn't much I could do locally to lean toward the video game industry. There wasn't a lot of digital art sort of training in my area. I ended up going to a different school in another state to learn more about that side of things, but it was a little more technical. I did get into some traditional art studies along with the graphic design education. However, it wasn't like an all-encompassing sort of, what I learned getting into the industry myself, and I'm sure Mike can attest to this, is that, in the game industry, your education is less important than what you're actually able to do. So for me, I practiced a lot of art and pixel art stuff before I ever even went to college, in my high school years and stuff. So that was actually more the basis for what allowed me to get into the industry to begin with, than a lot of that other stuff, even though a lot of it was very valuable to learn.
Yeah, I can definitely attest to that. I'm a high school dropout. I grew up in the ghetto. The school system was terrible. I became very disillusioned with that, so I did not pursue, even though I was being offered scholarships to go to like art. There's a famous, where I grew up, the Rhode Island School of Design. Like, I was on track to probably get a scholarship for that, and just didn't follow through with it. But as Corey was saying, that actually, your schooling is not relevant. It's the skills you develop. And long before high school, I was already working hard to achieve, pro level pixel art. And one of those things, luckily, like, I just developed a workflow with good old Deluxe Paint and Brilliance to be faster than most, which was really a thing that got my foot in the door in the industry, was not just being able to do nice work, but do it really quickly under deadlines.
I unfortunately, I was going to say I had MS Paint DOS. Yeah.
Brilliant. So is Bitbeam Canon both your full-time jobs, or do you do other things as well? And, are you inspired by any other indie retro studios like you aspire to be like?
We certainly have day jobs, and we do this on top of that. We aspire for it to be our day jobs for sure. We want it to be more than, just us, maybe making a couple of games or something. As many indie developers might want to do, we take this from a very professional approach, I believe. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, we're doing everything we can to simultaneously work on these two game projects and kind of build our infrastructure, our contacts, our social media presence. Like, we know that's these days every bit as important for an indie developer as making sure your game gets finished and to a high quality. Like, I actually know people, or actually Corey and I both know people that worked very hard with a pro team to make a very pro level game, only to have that game kind of disappear into the ocean of other games out in the market, and not see a return on your time and investment. So we're really this is something we love to do, and even if it never became our day jobs, it's something we would always do. But we're
Agreed.
definitely taking this very seriously. It's what we love and what we want to do for a living as well.
Yeah, no, I can definitely relate because we're the same with the podcast. It's not our full time job, but you know, it's something we're passionate about. So we do it every evening, like you guys do as well. So one of your shows on your YouTube channel, you mentioned social media presence stuff there, is one I really loved. I was watching it today, is Forensic Pixology. It looks really fun, you know, looking at the pixel art from the past. How did that kind of come about? You know, do you enjoy doing that? You know, what do you think of the technical constraints that, you know, they had back in the past?
Yeah, it's something Corey and I love to do. Like old school pixel artists. Corey and I grew up with consoles, 8 and 16-bit systems. I remember I used to rent, or actually our parents used to rent games for us in the summer. Instead of just playing them, I have an older brother who was learning programming, and I was, like I said, learning pixel art on the C64 and then Deluxe Paint on the Amiga. We'd pause the game and I'd be studying the blurry pixel art on a CRT monitor and talking to my brother, like, how did Capcom, how did Konami, how did Treasure get such amazing things to happen on screen on Mega Drive and SNES and stuff like that. And then, of course, the Amiga games like Shadow of the Beast. And so understanding, Corey and I both love the challenges of real pixel art on real retro consoles, that it's not just working in that resolution, it's color and memory constraints. And that's something we really wanted to, hopefully in an entertaining way, get modern generations of aspiring pixel artists who like it only because it's kind of a cool aesthetic and like a trend. We want them to understand kind of where it comes from and what the actual limitations were, that the pixel artists that they are looking at when they see retro games, what they were really dealing with. And it's, like I said, it's not just, oh, like, why did they do the animation that way? They should have done it with 20 frames of animation, full frame. Like a lot of younger artists, they don't understand that they were working with, what was it, Corey? Like the original Super Mario Brothers run animation is like,
yeah, it's like 3 frames or something. And the funny thing is the series sort of came about because we were collaborating a lot on calls and stuff anyways for Bitbeam Canon and otherwise. And we would just end up digressing sometimes into these kind of conversations ourselves. And we would just start talking, Mike would want to show me something about a certain game and I would do the same. And we ended up like realizing, I think, through those conversations, hey, we should record some of this stuff and make something out of it, And so that's, I think, how the whole idea came about just between the two of us from the get-go. And we love doing that series, and we haven't done one in a while, but we want to continue it for sure.
Oh yeah, and then where the name came from for the video series, Forensic Pixology. When I was eventually working in the studio, in studios like Glue Mobile and Game Loft before that, I had been talking with the art directors, and when analyzing the art of other games or other potential artists like that we might hire, I had mentioned I had been studying pixel art so long, just by seeing an image, I can usually tell what workflow and methodology and tools that artists had used to create the pixel art. So I said I'm like a forensic pixologist. By looking at one screen, I could see the history of how that image got to be, basically.
Yeah, you've had a lot of practice.
Yeah.
Who would you say then are your favorite pixel artists of all time and your kind of favorite pieces?
For me, it's tough to say. There's so much. A lot of my favorite pixel art comes from probably the 16-bit era, but I have a strong love for the NES era. It would be mostly Japanese stuff, to be honest with you, because I fell in love with the gameplay of those games, and then also the art. But as far as if I could name possibly the best pixel art I'd ever seen. Some of my favorite stuff, oddly enough, is RPG art. And Mike, well, I don't want to say he doesn't like RPGs, but he's more of an action
I
game
like
guy.
them. Yeah.
But the art side of it is why I played those games. I loved seeing that stuff. It never had the best animation or anything, but a lot of the old Squaresoft titles and getting into.
I was literally thinking of the old Final Fantasy games with the static images that just kind of vibrate.
They did not animate, but
they didn't animate, but they were beautiful. Yeah,
exactly. So and the way the battles were, you could look at them for a long time, like the images. Yeah. And so that's why I liked it, but that kind of stuff, it's hard to pinpoint a single person though. Picking a favorite would be impossible, I would say. Yeah. So.
Yeah. For me, it's similar. Most of my influence were Japanese. I really grew up with, the arcade and the 16-bit consoles. And so that's definitely the style I gravitate toward. There were definitely some very impressive Amiga games that all Amigans can name. And then that's the thing too. I'm terrible with names, but there's the artist that did Flink and who did really nice stuff. And
Henk Nyborg.
There you go.
Yes,
that definitely rings a bell. But in general, and this isn't just butt kissing, I'm partnered with one of my favorite pixel artists, being Corey. And it's, no, I mean, seriously, wait till you see, I just love his use of color and just brilliant environment stuff. There's some games you can't see yet, some projects that are on the back burner until we finish up Damon Claw and Metro Siege that are kind of his babies, that he is the creative spark behind, that he started, that I really can't wait to get on next after we finish these games. But I mean, like I've had the pleasure of being friends with and working some of the really great modern pixel artists that came up in the industry with me. So there's also, to throw out names, there's someone named Steve Cedar who went by the name something like Stoven. Was that what it was on the pixel art forums?
I don't remember his handle now, but
something like
Steve
that.
was great. We met him back in the mobile days. Some others as well.
Yeah. And there's a guy I worked with at Gameloft named Jun Choi, a Korean American, amazing artist altogether. He could do very high res stuff and pixel art, just absolutely brilliant stuff.
So you mentioned the games that you guys are currently working on, so Demon Claw and Metro Siege. So one of the ones I really want to talk about both of them, but I really want to sink my teeth into Metro Siege. So Ravi's wrote here, why did you choose the Metro Siege, to kind of be that Streets of Rage style game? For me, it's got more of a kind of like a Final Fight kind of vibe to it as well. But tell us about that choice. Tell us about the game.
Metro Siege is kind of my baby. It's beat 'em ups are my favorite genre. I grew up with an older brother, like I said, and it was just 2-player action we could just really have a blast with. So we played almost every 8 and 16-bit beat 'em up game you could imagine on any console and eventually arcade emulator that we could get our hands on, and of course going to the actual arcades. And so it had always been a dream of mine. And I grew up an Amigan, and it really, really frustrated me. While there's some stunning Amiga games out there, especially on the computer side, there's a game by Blue Byte. I think that's a German company called Settlers, which is absolutely brilliant and incredibly charming. So Simon the Sorcerer and stuff, like great computer style games. But when it came to real arcade style games, unfortunately, the Amiga suffered from some really bad ports and some really subpar originals trying to sort of lazily copy whatever genre became popular, like Street Fighter or something. So it's and a lot of the times it was not remotely the fault of the dev team. Like, one guy, the famous port of Final Fight for the Amiga, that's where Metro Siege started. Is I finally gave a try of the Amiga version of Final Fight, and I eventually read an interview of the programmer, the one-man team who was tasked with making the port in like 6 months' time of this super complex arcade game. They didn't even give him the graphics, for goodness sake. He had to start his task by writing his own code to rip the graphics out of an arcade board, and then just because he was not an artist, he just wrote an algorithm to just raw kind of grind all the graphics down to one single 16 color palette. And that's where it started. And then the programmer, he did an amazing job in that short amount of time to make a functioning port. But that's, a game like that, it needs a team with a lot of love and passion and skill for doing each element of the game. You know what I mean? You need more than one graphic artist, and they need the time to really, and then the programmer needs time to really optimize for that particular hardware. And as you know, so many arcade ports to Amiga suffered from Atari ST syndrome, where it was like this tiny team was basically just making the Atari ST version, and it shares the same main processor with the Amiga, so the Amiga is just going to inherit, for the most part, an Atari ST port, which had much weaker graphics. Yeah.
I think you're totally right there, because like some of the ports, like the Amiga got massively overshadowed by other consoles as well, and kind of the fighters, the brawlers, and the beat 'em ups. You'd have technically impressive stuff like Elf Mania. Right. That would be like themed around elves, and it was like
exactly.
There were just a few weird titles, and it would always be technically impressive, but not not the hit, or not the Mortal Kombat or the Street Fighter.
Right, exactly. And that's so basically it brought back the memory. Like, this was fairly recently. This was, I don't know. I say recently, but that's because I'm old. Maybe it was 8 years ago. I don't know.
Wow. But I thought you were going to say like 2 years ago.
Yeah, no. But the way that started was I played Final Fight on the Amiga. Yeah. It brought back the memories of my frustration as a teenager. Like, why do they look like this? And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to just take my time. It's the weekend or whatever. I'm going to find some pixel perfect screen grabs of Final Fight on the Amiga. And I'm going to prove how it could have looked, even within the Amiga constraints, just starting with 16 colors. And I literally this is where Metro Siege came from. I just painted over a screenshot of the Final Fight Amiga game just to see how nice I could make it look, how much more arcade quality I could make it look. Within the technical constraints of Amiga. And then years later, so that just kind of, I'm sure I put that out there in like some Amiga forums or whatever, but it didn't really pick up a lot of attention. But then more like 2.5 years ago, now we're getting more recent, someone on Facebook posted, an actual Amiga publisher posted in a Facebook group, an Amiga Facebook group, hey, Amigans, if you could have a brand new Amiga game made, what genre would you like to make it for? And if you're an Amiga creative person, programmer, artist, whatever, contact me, see if we could do something. So I responded in that thread and posted a lot of the mock-ups I had made for different games of how games could have looked on Amiga. And one of them happened to be what that Final Fight repaint evolved into, which was I just eventually, through repainting it, I just changed it and made original characters, an original HUD, original background. So eventually it didn't look anything like Final Fight. It looked like its own thing, because I don't see the point. If you're going to take all this time to make a game, like, make it original. So, but anyway, luckily at that point, Alex and John had very recently finished Worthy, and John spotted my game mock-ups, my Amiga graphics, in that thread. And apparently he contacted Alex and said, hey, we should contact this Mike guy and see if he wants to collaborate on a next project. So that's how we all got connected. John contacted me and said, hey, we're going to be starting up a new project soon. If you could make one of these mock-ups you showed, which one would you rather do? And I said, well, the beat 'em up would be the hardest one to do, but it's also, in my opinion, the one that the Amiga is most lacking a really high quality beat 'em up. I mean, don't get me wrong, the Golden Axe port was incredibly competent, But even it suffered, and obviously everyone's played Golden Axe a million times, and there are better playing versions on other systems, including emulation now. So I felt like there's really a good opportunity to put all of the things that I wished basically all of the most fun elements of all of the beat 'em ups I ever played with my brother. Can we merge them all together into one game? And as you mentioned, Final Fight, the two big main influences were definitely for gameplay Streets of Rage more than Final Fight, but for the aesthetic, maybe Final Fight more than Streets of Rage. But then the other missing link was it really shocked me, this weird thing growing up as an American with this influx of amazing Japanese video games that all became really popular and really outshadowed the creativity and kind of cool factor of most Western developed games back in the day. That's not true now, but it was then. And it was just, I thought it was so funny even back then. The Japanese game makers were copying Hollywood movies to make this. Why are they able to make video games cooler than the Westerners? That makes no sense. So all of those games like Final Fight, Streets of Rage 2, they were all heavily influenced by those classic 80s vigilante movies like what were they? Death Wish.
Warriors.
And the Warriors, exactly. So that's what I wanted to bring back into the mix with Metro Siege. Not only take all the best aspects of all the beat 'em up games I ever played with my brother, but also bring back that more cinematic kind of gritty, down to earth. You know, there's not suddenly going to be a level with space aliens or oh look the president is a cyborg. Like, you know what I mean? Like more down to earth, more cinematic feeling.
I think it literally says at the start of the game Bad Dudes, it has an intro that says the president was kidnapped by ninjas, and like that's all it says. Like it's just one sentence. So yeah.
What more than you need? What more do you need for it? Yeah. But I mean, even that could have been like an 80s movie, you know, just cast Jean-Claude Van Damme and, you know, you've got ninjas.
No story, just like 90 minutes of fighting, just that one bit of text at the start.
But even that,
I remember,
even that is more believable though than like you look at, like Final Fight wasn't too bad. It got a little weird, but Streets of Rage 2, even though it's by far my favorite beat 'em up game, it went kind of crazy. You had like cyborgs and space aliens just out of nowhere suddenly. And so the point is, one of the things I wanted to prove with Metro Siege is there's another form of creativity that's not just off the wall. It's like, in my opinion, the best poetry even is when you're working within the constraints of classical poetry. You actually need meter, you actually need rhyme. It makes the artist care and think more about what they can do within those constraints. And I think it's one of the reasons Corey and I love pixel art. But I wanted to make the ultimate beat 'em up game that no one's ever played before. But that's kind of the whole thing with the sort of motto or MO of Bitbeam Canon is, imagine you woke up back in the 80s, but in a parallel universe where every AAA 16-bit game was one you never saw before. So it's like they have their version of Capcom or whatever. But do you remember that excitement when a new Capcom game came out and you bought it and brought it home and you were putting the cartridge in the console for the first time and you were just being wowed, you know what I mean? And it was just exciting. And we want to bring back, like, that's a problem. We have nostalgia. We can boot up an emulator and play all these classic games, but we've seen them and played them a million times. So we wanted to create new games that feel incredibly legitimately retro, but also incredibly fresh at the same time.
Looking at it as well from the demos, what we've seen, you know, you mentioned storylines and stuff. I remember Banshee had this whole thing about the inventor of the microwave, and it just seemed really kind of slapped together. But, you know, technically on this, it looks beautiful, but, you know, you've got a lot of stuff in here which we haven't seen before in Amiga games, and like moving backgrounds with the trains and... you know, you've got pillars in front of it. I saw a technical video that you did about the details and stuff. And I guess you've got full button support as well for lots of other buttons rather than just one.
Yeah.
Was it a real tough job, kind of getting all these things done? And did plexiglass really help you out? Pixel gas.
Pixel glass,
help you
yeah.
out with that?
No, that would be Alex Brown, which is Enable Software. Luckily, he is just an amazing, not only in ability and knowledge and skill programmer, but also his level of dedication and passion for just getting it, like every off the wall feature I asked for, he has made happen. And just if there's ever a bottleneck where he's waiting for art, he'll just do another optimization pass and say, "Oh, I squeezed out more memory we can now use for other stuff," or, now we can get a few more sprites or a few more colors on screen. It has been absolute. This is the dream team. It is literally a dream come true. I've wanted to make the ultimate Amiga game to show that it could have competed with Mega Drive and even arcade back in the day. And I literally have the perfect team I'm working with to do that. And yeah, I can't wait to show you guys the overhaul that we've just done to level 2. You mentioned the subway level with all the parallax scrolling. It's just upgraded considerably, and no one's seen it yet. So you guys can be among the first to see it. Yeah, Corey. I mean, no one outside of the team. Right. Corey is one of the dream team I mentioned.
There was a video as well which had the technical breakdown on Amiga Bill, where you were talking about how you'd actually use the copper and stuff for the floor, and there was lots of different elements that were just it was like demo coding or something on top of the game.
Absolutely. That's the key. You can't use, if you want to compete with Mega Drive and even arcade and make a side-scrolling action game with parallax, you can't use the Amiga kind of out of the box the way even the inventors of the hardware assumed you would use it, like with the dual playfield mode to get the parallax scrolling. If you just use dual playfield mode, you're going to end up with incredibly severe color limitations, which are going to be very glaringly obvious compared to a Mega Drive. But you can do in later generation games on Amiga, they realized you can actually trick the Amiga to repeat its very humble amount of sprites over and over again across the screen and make that appear behind the background graphics to give yourself a back layer of scrolling. And you can even use the copper to add more colors to that. And you can slice it up to make it have even more line scrolling or parallax scrolling. So that's one of the many, many tricks that we do in any given Metro Siege level to add more parallax, because that was one of the compromises that you constantly saw on Amiga ports, is just no parallax scrolling. And to me, on a side-scrolling game, it's almost sacrilege to not have layered scrolling. It's incredibly disappointing for me for a 16-bit game to just be so flat. Like everything is just moving on one plane. And thankfully, like I said, Alex was just up for every challenge, and we've been able to just get there's an average of over 60 colors on screen, many layers of parallax, and we can get up to 2 full-size players and 4 enemies on screen, all at the same time, all with music and sound effects playing simultaneously, which was another all too common compromise. Even in some AAA quality Amiga games like Blood Money, you had to choose between music and sound effects.
So it's interesting, actually. You kind of half answered our next question already.
Okay.
So kind of what you mentioned a lot of limitations, and challenges and stuff like that you've been faced with, and how you've had to remove, certain things to then get extra space here and stuff like that. What essential elements of beat 'em ups did you need to kind of keep in the game? And was there anything you've kind of had to sacrifice to get it running on the Amiga?
Absolutely. It wasn't specifically an Amiga limitation. It was just memory. And it's always a tug of war. When you want to get so many things into a game, you always have to make judgment calls. Well, which thing is more important? Which thing is more fun, ultimately? That's what really matters in an action game. And the one thing I really wanted to really take this genre to another level was there was a more obscure, I think it was still Capcom, correct me if I'm wrong, Corey, but Knights of the Round.
Yeah, I think that's Capcom.
Yeah, it's Capcom.
Yeah. It's a great beat 'em up game, and half the people that play it never learn that there's a mechanism in the game where you can actually block And if you block just at the last second before the enemy hits you, you blink and become invulnerable. And if you press attack after that point, you do an automatic kind of more powered up attack.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem.
And I've played that game through like 5 times.
Yeah, and it makes the game so much cooler when you learn it. But unfortunately, like Corey and I have had this discussion before about ideas. When you're developing a game, there's an idea that sounds really cool, and then you get it into the game, and even if you try tweaking it and stuff, it just doesn't work out. It's the idea was cool, but it just doesn't work in reality. And then there's other ideas that are really cool ideas. You get it in, and then if you don't have a ton of time to really perfect the visual feedback, the timing, all the gameplay elements around that idea, you could have a great idea and kind of drop the ball with it, or just kind of meh, just like a ho-hum kind of implementation of that great idea. And that was kind of the situation with Knights of the Round. Even back in the day as a teenager playing this game with my brother and discovering this, I thought, what an amazing mechanic for gameplay. But you could tell the designers never had the time to really make that an obvious and really rewarding aspect of the gameplay, which is part of why most people never even notice or realize or learn that you can do that in that game. So that idea, like the things that were always the most fun to me in the beat 'em up games, not only was obviously the 2-player element, but things like being able to hit the enemies while they're down to kind of finish them off, and throwing enemies into each other. And also from Knights of the Round specifically, I made a tweaked and more fully realized version of that block and counter attack. So basically picture virtually everything you can do in Streets of Rage 2, but add on top of that multiple ways to hit enemies while they're down, and a block. And the way the block system works in Metro Siege is you can initiate a block at any time and you can hold it. But if you just keep holding it, then you're bracing, and that'll reduce damage of some moves. But if someone has a baseball bat and swings at you, you're still going to get knocked on your butt, basically, and still take a lot of damage. But if you time if you trigger the block that split second before the attack would have hit you, you'll do an automatic parry and counterattack. So you'll take no damage. You'll instantaneously do a special move. So that there's that real risk versus reward, and reward to the player for getting really good at timing.
We'll get back to Amiga, but first I want to talk about Cyberjack. And this is a kind of side-scrolling NES-style game as well, with really nice parallax. What are the influences for this title?
Cyberjack is the first sort of real game that we try to collaborate on with Bitbeam Canon. Before anybody really knew about us or anything, it was the first thing we were just sort of trying to build. It is built in Construct 3, but it's made to match NES specs. The inspiration is definitely sort of classic Capcom action games, that sort of thing. And it was more Mike's idea for a premise for a game. I worked on most of the visuals, but he designed the character, and we've fleshed out the story a little bit of that universe. But we, at the moment, it was once Metro Siege and Damon Claw came into sort of full swing, we wanted to focus more in that area, but it's still there as something we want to really get into when, if NES sort of stuff is something we're going to do in the future, that would probably be the first thing we did,
Yeah, it was based on, even though it's got a lot of parallax, it's all based on proven techniques that later generation NES games had. So theoretically, with a good programmer and a good team, everything you see, if you look at the Cyberjack video on our website, theoretically, everything there is actually matching the specs, and a real NES could do it. But it would just, with the caveat that it would need the same kind of helper memory swapper chip that the later generation NES games had. So that as Corey said, the real influences were things like Mega Man, but also Ninja Gaiden, the Ninja Gaiden trilogy on Super Nintendo. I mean, not regular Nintendo, not Super Nintendo, but and it basically just It's always the same idea. No matter what platform we're developing for or basing, because we're just hardcore pixel artists, we like developing for retro consoles. And even when we don't, because in Construct 3, we could use all 24-bit full color graphics. We could do it all high res, but we love the aesthetic, and we love the extra challenge and that retro feel. So even when we make retro style games, they're not just retro style, they're actually matching the technical constraints of some old system. So that one was based on the NES, and we were very careful with color limitations and figuring out how we would do that parallaxing. But as always, the most important thing is just gameplay, just overall quality and how fun is it. So that's another thing that really, I think, Amiga action games usually suffered from. They'd be these amazing tech demos with amazing sound and visuals and lots of colors and parallax, but not play quite so well. Which one of the testaments to that is the fact that it's stuck with a one button joystick for most of its life.
Well, and to be I was going to say,
sorry.
to be fair on the NES, I mean, yeah, there are those classics we all remember, but there was also a sea of games like that as well, which, they might look neat, but then you'd play it and, very poor mechanics or something,
Could these titles be ported across to other titles as well, like all the stuff that you're working on, to other systems even?
Yes, there's definitely, and not only is it a possibility, it's highly likely. We've been contacted and have started communicating with a couple of very accomplished developers for different systems, such as Mega Drive.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can't promise anything yet. Nothing is concrete, but it's extremely likely in the future of many, if not most of these games. Obviously, Metro Siege from day one will run on classic Amigas. Any OCS or ECS Amiga with at least 1 meg of total RAM, it runs beautifully on. But it will also from day one be on modern systems. Damon Claw is going the opposite. We're coming at it from the opposite direction, where we're making it in Construct for modern platforms. But then the plan is that the engine, the code that Alex Brown is making Metro Siege with, is becoming what Alex Brown calls Engine 9000, which is going to be the foundation, hopefully, for many future games on classic Amiga and modern systems. And so the Amiga port of Damon Claw will actually be running on the Metro Siege engine.
So yeah, you mentioned Demon Claw there, so that's another Amiga title you're working on. What's the idea behind that then? Because that's got a completely, I wouldn't say completely different vibe to Metro Siege, but it's, for me, it's kind of got like a kind of Mega Man cross with Demon Crest kind of vibe to it.
I was going to say, yeah, with Damon Claw, interestingly enough, I believe, Mike, it started with the tech demo that you came up with a long time ago for Amiga, right? And it originally didn't have any sort of premise or story. It was just the character in a small environment. And eventually we took a look at it, and Mike had come up with this particular fantasy universe that he had always wanted to do and had it in his mind for many years. And we liked the idea of doing this action game that was a little more in the style of sort of the classic side-scrolling action game that wasn't necessarily a platformer, but like the old, things like the original Rygar arcade or Altered Beast or something, that wasn't specifically more like Mario or anything, or a Mega Man game, but you just went from one side to the other, and it was more action-based. And we liked that idea. Kind of the classic Castlevanias, too, were a little bit that way. And Mike always loved that genre as well. And we thought it would be neat to tie it sort of into that universe and make it, in a way, a sort of prehistory. And that's kind of where the story comes from. And we actually have recordings of us that our patrons have access to of us literally fleshing out the story of this world and everything and the entire design of it. And so we had Damon Claw has been a full on sort of collaboration between the two of us. double teaming it. So yeah, you can
Yep.
pick it up there.
Yeah, it started as a soulless kind of graphical tech demo. I wanted to prove, even with Amos on the Amiga, in a stock Amiga 500, that you could get some really nice looking parallax scrolling with a lot of colors on screen. If you're really careful. Luckily, I had the help of Mike Ness, another great member of the Amiga community and a very knowledgeable Amos programmer, to help me optimize it. But we got, and you can actually go, if you go to our website, bitbeamcanon.com, into the Classic Systems Amiga section, you could actually download that original Damon Claw Amos demo, actually load it right into Amos and see how we did it. But there's a really cool blitting trick you can do to basically fake a back layer back there, with some limitations, but you could get some really nice results. And so it started that way. And then as I was working more and more with Corey, and like I showed him that demo, and like Corey was saying, we had this idea of maybe making it into a full game and bringing it into this eventual world or franchise of games that take place in this one kind of universe and world history. And then it really, the creativity just really exploded, and it became, a very specific, rich story. And the gameplay actually is very heavily influenced by one of the most generic sounding and looking games you could ever see for the 8-bit Sega Master System, called Black Belt, which was the localization of Fist of the North Star from Japan. And so the two main influences on it were Altered Beast and Black Belt. So basically we wanted the really fast, almost rhythm action gameplay style of Black Belt, with some of the creative elements of Altered Beast, like the fact, like in Altered Beast, in every level, or almost every level, you get different abilities once you transform into a different animal. In Damon Claw, you don't transform into a different thing like a werewolf, but you have a magic gauntlet that takes on a different form and gives you different magical abilities in each level.
Yeah.
So that's the Altered Beast aspect of things. And then most of the gameplay is more based on Black Belt, while it's definitely more sophisticated. There's a lot more moves and variety of enemies, but the core is that very fast rhythm action gameplay style that we think most 2D games, even before, like a long time ago, when before the end of the 16-bit era, things kind of stagnated in creativity and fell into grooves. Like every game like Castlevania suddenly had to be a Metroidvania.
Yeah.
And we're trying to bring back that idea of, like, people started, like, even video game magazines and reviewers, they started directly equating how long it takes you to beat the game the first time through with the value of the game, like replay value. They associated it as the same thing. And in my opinion, while I love Metroidvania games, especially now when I have, day jobs and family and children and stuff like that, I love a game that I can pick up, play, beat the whole game, which is so much more rewarding, like really have a blast, beat the game in like 20 to 30 minutes. And then it was so fun, I might want to play that same game later that day. Whereas opposed to, like most modern games, it might take you like 9 hours, 50 hours, whatever, to beat it the first time. But then the question is, how long before you want to play that game again?
Never again, no doubt.
Yeah, often that's the case. And we want to bring back that whole, it's missing. Like, there are very few games now that you could just pick it up, play for, like, just go through the whole thing in like a half hour, and you've just had a blast. It never got boring. And later that day, you're like, I want to play it again. Like that's value. You know what I mean? And it's like, I always make the joke of grinding, like, it takes 60 hours to beat this game. Yeah, but 30 of those hours are like killing wild animals in the forest to build up your experience points.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, yeah. So,
no,
anyway.
I know exactly what you mean. I've been, don't get me wrong, I love it. I've been playing Doom Eternal for like a month for half an hour a night because I have a daughter and, she's only 9 months old, and it's like, I'm loving the game, but I just want to play something different now because I've been playing it for like a month. Yeah. It's probably only like a 15-hour game, but you miss that sense of just picking a game up, completing it within the hour, And you're like, oh, that was really fun. I'll show that to a friend, like, next week, and we'll play it again. And you've got no, kind of like qualms of doing that. So Demon Claw and Metro Siege, I'm really excited for them. And you touched on there, like, you're talking with, some producers to get it to the Mega Drive and stuff like that. Are you hoping for physical releases for it? And is it, are they going to be released kind of like on Xbox Live and stuff like that as well? Is that kind of the plan with it?
Yeah, we're not just hoping for it, we're planning on it, and things
Brilliant.
certainly look like they're going in that direction. We certainly plan for that. We're retro developers. We love it's. We want our games to be something special and to be an experience. And of course, there will be software downloadable versions.
Yeah.
But we want people that really want the full nostalgic experience to really have something special. So we're planning boxed editions for any game we make. It doesn't seem, we've done quite a bit of research, and we have a lot of interested publishers that have contacted us going a while back. So there certainly doesn't seem to be any things that would stop us from doing so. Obviously, it's all going to depend on the level of interest we can develop. But so far, all is good, and that is the plan. And before I got into video games in my early teens, I thought for sure I was going to be a comic book artist. And I don't know, like, there's even some of my videos drawing, like designing some of the Demon Claw characters and stuff like that on our YouTube channel. But the point is, like, I really have plans. Oh, and you've seen my fine art paintings. So the box arts for the game are going to be hand painted, just like the old fashioned, like really high quality Capcom type boxes. And my plan is to do the manuals, the printed manuals for the game, to look a lot like a classic late 80s, early 90s American comic book.
Awesome.
So it'll be illustrated that way. It'll look more like a comic than a regular game manual. But that's the plans.
I'm looking forward to that. I love just, downloading and playing a retro game, just like you say, what we were talking about a minute ago, just playing a retro game, hammering the achievements for a couple of hours, and obviously, the physical releases are always really cool. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that.
Well, Michael and Corey, it's been amazing. And we've got one last question, which what are your future plans for Bit Being Canon?
As we touched on, we're doing everything we can to make it so we don't have to do day jobs on top of Bitbeam. We would love to be developing our own retro games all day, every day, instead of all night, every night on top of our day jobs and every weekend. But, we're that passionate about it. Like, even on top of our day jobs, even after doing a full day's work of pixel art for other people's games. And even when we need to take a break from working on our stuff, that's why we have Cyberjack to the point where it is. And the projects I mentioned that Corey had started, sometimes even to rest my brain from working on Metro Siege, instead of just vegging out and watching a TV show or a movie or playing a game, I'll actually have this creative itch. Like, I have an idea for another character or game. So we've got this amazing backlog of other stuff, of whole other games that are waiting for us to bring to life.
Yes, quite a lot, in many different genres as well. So there are they say ideas are a dime a dozen, but I always enjoy at least taking an idea to where it's something that would excite another human being, to where they would want to see more of it. And we've taken many ideas into those realms. Obviously, we haven't shown much of that stuff yet. So we do have lots of plans for future games. Outside of that, who knows that?
Well, guys, if I could have a time machine, I would put you guys in it and take you back to the Amiga heyday, and we could reign supreme as kings. It's been wonderful having you on the show.
Thanks very much for having us on.
Thanks a lot.